And so it's really hard to know when you enter into that environment what your status is and what you can and cannot expect in terms of respect, in terms of help if you get into trouble, in terms of protection from anything that may or may not happen to you when you're on stage, when you're off stage. And essentially the answer is you don't have any of those things, you know?
Welcome to The Courage Effect. I'm Suzanne Weller, and this is a show about growth and unleashing what's possible. You will hear inspiring stories about what courage looks like, how we navigate what's getting in our way, and the opportunities that surface when we choose courage over comfort. Let's get started. Hi, everybody. It's Suzanne. Welcome to The Courage Effect. I am really excited for our guest today, who is Alicia Dara. She is somebody that I met at an event that I had co-hosted a number of years ago for the Elevate Network, which is a professional women's network. And she was there talking about the power voice for career women and executive women and just women overall in life and in work, really finding your power voice. And it really left an impact on me. And as I have seen her work over the past few years, what she does, she inspires me on a number of levels. So today we're here to talk about women in the music industry. And obviously there's quite a bit of courage that goes along with that. And how can we potentially also be finding our power voice? So let me tell you about Alicia Dara. She is a nationally recognized executive speech and presentation coach. She's worked with an array of corporate clients, including Microsoft, Amazon, Planned Parenthood, and Carhartt. She has an extensive musical background and founded the award-winning indie folk band Diamond Wolf. I love that name, Diamond Wolf, and I love the music. And in 2023, Alicia became the founder and editor-in-chief of Women Cake magazine. Alicia, welcome to The Courage Effect.
Thank you. It's my pleasure, Suzanne. Thank you for having me. I am so grateful for your introduction, and I apologize to my listeners. I'm having some severe allergies and histamine situation right now, so my voice is certainly not what it should be, but I'm honored to be your guest, and thank you for having me.
Well, and I'm thank you for being here. I'm sorry that your voice isn't exactly where you want it to be, but hopefully we'll have the conversation and find your power voice as you go through that.
Absolutely. So, yes, I have faith.
So as we had talked about before, as we were prepping for the show, you really wanted to make sure we were talking about the courage that it takes to be a woman in the music business, because we've seen over the number of years the Me Too movement, which has really made a significant impact on the entertainment industry, but it really has only started to crack the surface of the music industry.
Yeah.
So there you go.
I don't even think I think it's barely scratched the surface. You know, it's funny. A lot of this, I think, is, as with all things, I think a lot of this is generational, because I have some Gen Z, some Gen Z friends, some young women who are in the business who are working through the same issues in a way that is quite a bit more supported culturally. And by that, I mean in their own local communities and sort of culturally in terms of where we are sort of in general with the movement. So they're feeling a lot more support and a lot more courage, actually, to be able to speak up about the things that are happening to them. But my generation, I'm Generation X, and us and everybody that came before us really just kind of had to endure this environment that was horrifically sexist and sometimes violent. And there really was no, as is the case with any kind of role or job where there's no federal oversight, there's no protection for workers, there was no central authority that we could really go to talk about these things. Yeah. And it was really considered to be the price of admission for the business. And I don't think that I fully understood that when I entered the business. My parents are classical musicians. They were professional symphony musicians, which is actually a union job. And so there is, in fact, a central authority there. There is plenty of support for workers. Although now we can also see, the Me Too movement has also reached the classical music world. And there was quite a big reckoning that happened a couple of years ago. I think we're still going through that. But at least in terms of protection for workers, there was something in place there. And so I think coming from that background, and then, I came from my hometown of Vancouver, Canada. I went to theater school in New York City, and immediately upon graduation, I embarked on my career as a singer-songwriter. And there was nothing, there was no instruction, there was no manual, there was no industry convention that would talk about these things, the only thing that we had for protection was whisper networks. And those things were extensive, and they were protective and extremely helpful a lot of the time. Not all of the time, but a lot of the time.
Can you talk a little bit about what whisper networks are?
Yes, they still exist. I mean, I think they're still thriving in many industries around the world, including here in the US. So essentially what it is it's the women who have come before you, or the women who are in the industry who have experienced all of the terrible behavior and who have kept a list going among the group of men to avoid, essentially. That's the kind of whisper network we're talking about here. So I paid very close attention to these things. I think that I was able to, like most women, I was able to rely on them to a certain degree. I think that they were very helpful in terms of avoiding predators in the music business side. So they would talk to us about, different kinds of producers. It was always music producers were the worst, You'd have to avoid certain producers. You'd have to avoid certain engineers. They would say like, okay, this person is safe as long as you don't get alone with them in the recording studio, make sure there's someone else there with you and they won't try anything. Or, this person is safe as long as you have a man with you. So make sure you bring, I don't know, some dude in your life along to the studio and they won't try anything. But no one ever really talked about the sort of general attitude toward women in the business. And here I'm really speaking about audiences and what would happen in a lot of those situations in the clubs. And I mean, I could go down a whole list of ways in which music clubs are not promoting gender equity and in fact encouraging sexism and sexual violence. The most obvious thing I could point to, and this is true, Suzanne, and you know the city of Seattle the way I do, and you can go into any club and see this. When you go into these clubs, typically if you're a young performer or any age of performer, you go into these clubs, there is no real dressing room. Maybe you might have a dressing room, you might have a green room with its own bathroom, but generally you have to use the same bathroom facilities as the audience. Yeah. And the way that these clubs are designed, the women's bathroom is the farthest room in the back of the club, closest to the door to the alley. And the door to the alley is always open because it is always smelly and hot in these clubs, So you're essentially going into a room which is completely open to the back of a dark area. There's so much noise that if something happens to you back there, nobody can hear. And incidents like this took place fairly frequently when I was living in Seattle back in the day, in the mid-90s when I came here. And certainly I can tell you this absolutely happened in New York City. Mm-hmm. And, that's just the environment, the work environment in which women are expected to show up for work every day, And I should probably speak about all genders because I think this kind of assault actually did happen quite a lot, excuse me, across genders. But it's just something that I was particularly aware of and conscious of, So there was that. And then really also kind of the understanding of what your status is in this office, which I say in quotation marks, which is essentially a rock club. So you walk in. This is why I don't like going to bars at all now. I've never really enjoyed being them, but I really don't like them at all. To me, it's like an office because I worked in them. They were my workplace for so long. Yeah. And I had to go into this environment that was uniquely hostile. And so it's really hard to know when you enter into that environment what your status is and what you can and cannot expect in terms of respect, in terms of help if you get into trouble, in terms of protection from anything that may or may not happen to you when you're on stage, when you're off stage. And essentially the answer is you don't have any of those things, Yeah. And so it's really, you have to develop this kind of thick skin. You have to develop this, or at least we had to develop this kind of sort of thick exoskeleton that really makes you kind of numb. You sort of have to numb out a little bit. And that's not exactly the state that you want to be in as a performer. You really want to be very generous. You want to be very open. There is the skill of reading the room, which has become a cultural expression that we throw at politicians and all kinds of, public figures who are not understanding, what's actually happening in the environment in which they're appearing, and they're not, responding in a very present, attuned way with the audience. This is what the performer's special skill is, if you will. It is the quality of attunement, where you are tuning into the energy in the room. And ideally, you are guiding that energy to go in a certain direction that you want it to go. And it's kind of a service mindset that you have in your soul. And it's really hard to do that when you have to maintain this exoskeleton just to kind of protect yourself, you know? So you have this dynamic going on. And then on top of all of that, you are, at least we were expected to dress in a way that was at least somewhat provocative. And the tricky part there is that you could choose not to dress in a way that was somewhat provocative, but you would not get the attention that you needed in order to be able to have the impact that you want to have. You really had to use everything in your power to get the audience's attention. So it was quite a lot. And there actually is an incident here I also want to share that has to do with just dealing with an audience. So many times I had to carry, you know, my own amp and my own guitar, and I would come off the stage. You know, the audiences were very, very unpredictable in these environments. I was in these big, loud, noisy rock clubs. They were highly male-dominated environments. Oftentimes I was opening for like an all-male grunge band or something. And the environment in there is hyper-masculine. Mm-hmm. And, you know, so I would come away from the stage and I would have finished my set and I have my guitar in one hand and my amp in the other. And I'd have to walk from the stage to the door just to get out of the club. The club is very noisy. It's very, very crowded. You can't see anything in there. Anything can happen. Most nights I would come home and I would, like, you know, undress for bed, and like weird phone numbers and strange notes and stuff would fall out of my clothes because men would have stuffed them down my clothes, you know, front and back. And I can't do anything because I'm holding my guitar and my amp. Well, one night in the city of Seattle, I was moving from, as I just described, from the stage to the door of the club. And there was a log jam of people. I had to set down my guitar and my amp. So I stood there and it was very, very crowded. There were tons and tons of men around me. Then there was an opening. I picked up my guitar and my amp. And when I bent over, somebody either punched me or kicked me from behind. They essentially kicked me in the vulva. God. And I was so bruised that I just had to like lie down in the back of my friend's car. I was in horrible pain for weeks. There was nobody to report to. There was no one to talk to about it. My friends were genuinely very consoling, but no one said, hey, you experienced an assault. You need to call the police. And I wouldn't have known how to deal with that situation. Nobody like said anything. Nobody helped me. I just had to carry on and continue. And I've never spoken really about this incident before publicly, but it really was so terrifying. And it really led to my having to create, I think, an even thicker skin around me. I seem to recall that I had to actually take a little break from performing for 6 weeks just to kind of recover from that, which was a dent in my income, you know? Yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing that story. I mean, that's intense. And just the idea of not having anybody to go to in that moment. And I mean, being in such a hyper, not, I don't even just want to say hyper masculine, but like just hyper unsupportive environment on all fronts. Yes. And to be in physical pain and also the psychological damage that goes with that, that's trauma. So I'm sorry you had to go through that.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate it. It was a lot. It really, yeah, it's funny. I really only started thinking about it and talking about it in the last couple of months. It changed the way that I performed. It changed the way that I saw everything. It changed the way that I felt in those environments. It changed the way that I related to other women in those environments. It made me hyper vigilant, I think, for my own safety, and certainly for that of the women around me. Right after this era, like just following this, the Lilith Fair was starting to come into the consciousness. It was starting, you know, we'd had the first Lilith Fair and clubs were starting to think, oh, maybe we can actually have more women on a bill. Maybe we can have more than just one. And I jumped on that immediately. And I really believe that I started decentering men from my whole professional environment in that sense. And I really worked very hard to get other women to come on the bill with me. I felt instinctively more safe, you know, and sure enough, you know, once we all started talking to each other about these things, many other women had incidents like this. Many other women had been assaulted by the crowd inside these clubs, you know, not just in the recording studio, but also in these work environments where we were. So having this wonderful sort of influx of women, of many more women, immediately made the whole environment feel quite a bit more safe. And I think that was an enormous life lesson for me in a big way that I have carried forward. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I hate to say we need to cut to a break, but I want to sit with that story, and I want to come back to what you're talking about, like power in numbers, and how are you combating that? And what are the changes that you're actually putting in place for yourself and driving forward for women as well in the larger music industry?
Sure.
So I'm sorry to cut to a break, but keep on listening, everybody. We will be right back. Courage takes on many forms. I know from personal experience that one of the most courageous things we can do is to recognize when we need help and seek out support. If you're going through a hard time, feeling like something is interfering with your happiness or the ability to achieve your goals, therapy can give you tools to approach your life in a very different way. And that's why I'm excited to tell you about today's sponsor, BetterHelp. BetterHelp's mission is to make therapy more affordable and accessible. It's an online platform where you can be matched with a professional therapist in as little as a few days. For more information and to get matched with a therapist, go to BetterHelp, that's HELP.com/courage. Visiting this link both supports this show and gets you 10% off your first month of BetterHelp. So if you're struggling, consider online therapy with BetterHelp. Welcome back to The Courage Effect. This is Suzanne, and I'm in conversation with Alicia Dara. Alicia, you just shared quite a harsh and traumatizing story, something that you went through in your professional environment, which was a music club. And I realized that that isn't a place where a lot of people, they don't call that their professional environment. But despite what that environment is, the whole idea of camaraderie and solidarity, particularly with other women, is a very powerful voice. Additional allyship also needs to be a part of this. It's just not women with women, but other people that can come to create that solidarity. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about what solidarity is and what it looks like.
Sure. I mean, I think the big takeaway for me from that part of my life was really understanding the power of solidarity and what solidarity looks and feels like. And I think it's funny. I now my career has really moved into this phase where I do some executive coaching, and I'm inside all different kinds of environments. I taught my methods in over 200 workplaces, and I work across multiple sectors and industries. I work with large groups of corporate women and groups of women in various companies, and I work with individuals. And I get to see a lot of these same solutions playing out in these environments, which are equally sexist, just in different ways, by the way. But a lot of it is really about sharing resources, sharing community, and providing a safe space for women to be able to talk about these things, and for women to really be able to be in community with one another in a very, very deeply honest way, in a deeply honest place. And I think especially in terms of career satisfaction, I think this is true for any career, any sector, any industry for women. There needs to be a way, a place where women can go to relieve the pressure of just being a woman inside these environments. And this is why I think gender-based caucusing is really powerful. It is the reason why when I am doing some consulting, primarily I'm a coach, but occasionally I'll be asked by companies to serve as a consultant when they're building out their DEI programs, particularly around gender equity. And it is the reason why I tell them they need to have a line item in their budget for a women's ERG group, employee resource group, specifically for women, that is all about community and robust professional development, so that there is this place where women can go to feel these things. I know personally, I know anecdotally, and I know professionally that these environments have a powerful and lasting positive effect on women. And the funny thing is, when I started in the music business, this was way before the internet. And it was really during the grunge era, when there were like very few women who were even allowed, to appear on a bill or be on the radio or whatever it was, be in the studio. I had the feeling that something wasn't right. I knew that it wasn't enough. The whole industry, the business really encouraged women to think of ourselves, to really be in silos. And the whole business siloed us. We were not really allowed to be on the same bill. This is history. You can look it up.
Yeah.
And so there was sort of a mindset about like, okay, staying in your own lane, keeping your head down, and like treating every woman like competition. Competition is a zero-sum game, and every other woman in this environment is competition. And there was a lot of that happened really before the Lilith Fair came in and changed a lot of things, not everything, but a lot of things. And it's funny because I see women in these corporate environments who've had their head down in their own lane, working like gangbusters for like decades, who have this same mindset. And they get to a particular point in their career, and two things happen. One is that they get so close to burnout that they're hanging on the edge. And the second thing is that they want to move into a position of leadership where they need to work with other women at a high level who are their peers, and they have no experience doing it. So I'm able to really kind of, I think, relate to them in a deep way on this particular issue, and remind them that we are so much more powerful when we work together. There is such a beautiful shared strength. And from that shared strength comes shared resources. And my favorite expression that I use with my corporate women all the time is women together can change the weather. And the weather in these environments is not very hospitable to them, But to your point also about male allies, I think male allyship is an important part of this. It's a really crucial part. And I know in my own life, I learned to identify, and I think to some extent, every woman certainly learns to do this. I learned to identify what really good male allyship looks like, what really good safety was such a big concern back in the day in those environments. So identifying safe men was really important. And then coming to understand what male allyship looks like is very important too. And it's pretty great. I would say it is not common enough. We don't have enough male allyship. I think that there are some men who believe that the best thing they can do as allies is to kind of just shut up when women are speaking, which I would say is like base camp. You got to climb from there, and that's not the only skill. That's not the only valuable skill that male allies can bring to this arena. There's plenty of other stuff. So a lot of times in my training, when I'm doing mixed gender cohorts, a lot of what I'm talking about is I'm really speaking to men and saying, look, here's some other skills. These are some other ways you can learn to do these things,
I love that. I think it's vital that we do that for each other as women, but that it's also done for our allies, for other human beings. How do we actually stand up and raise our voice for people that are LGBTQ, or for people that are disenfranchised by race or other things in their society that are not giving them the voice that they have? How do we potentially help them to raise it?
Agreed. Yeah, it's funny. I try to remind myself and my clients that when it comes to finding your power voice, some of that is really learning to center other people's voices, right? And the tricky part is that women are socially conditioned to put everyone else's thoughts and ideas and opinions and expertise before their own. And so much of what I'm doing when I am coaching women is reminding them to center their own voices, to center their own expertise, to really speak up for their skills, knowledge, wisdom, and expertise, and to do it in ways that are very clear, concise, and compelling. This is an enormous part of what I'm coaching women to do. But I'm also reminding everybody, let's look around in our environment, let's practice inclusive behaviors, and let's look and recognize when it is time to center someone else's voice. That is also a very personally empowered action that anyone can take.
I really appreciate that you mentioned that, because as we said, it's not just about us raising our voices, but it's making sure that there's room for other voices, because we do not want to just suck out all of the air with just our breath.
Yes, yes, very, very important. And you brought up something else too, which is that actually, when it comes to the sort of physiological part of your power voice, a powerful voice comes from powerful breath. And without trying to get in trouble, I'm constantly reminding women to get rid of any kind of garment that's going to impede your breathing. Breath is the gas that makes the car go. So the car is your voice, and breath is the gas that fuels the car. If you have any kind of wardrobe situation, I can't tell you how many of my clients go into these like really high level corporate interviews wearing all kinds of like, I don't know, what are they, like waist shrinking undergarments and like tight belts and stuff. Like, are you kidding me? Like, there's no gas. There's no fuel getting to the voice, You have to be able to expand and to breathe deeply in order to have a powerful voice. It's so important. That's why my allergies right now are driving me crazy, because it's a little bit impeding my breathing. My voice is a little bit below where it should be right now.
Oh, yes, I totally get this. I've actually been doing voice lessons for the past couple of years. And one of the things that really surprised me was movement.
Oh my gosh. Wow. Yeah, it's okay. We really can't underestimate how powerful this is in terms of alignment. The larynx is very small, right? If you think about it, it's like just a little bit bigger than a quarter. That is the organ that houses your vocal cords. It is so small. And so alignment in that area, right? When your body is tense, if you've had a really tight, tense sort of work day, maybe your body's sort of guarding, performing some guarding actions and muscles in your spine and your shoulders and your neck and your jaw. I have clients with TMJ, right? So you have a lot of tension around this tiny little area. Getting up and moving around is incredibly liberating to that whole area. And being able to physically be present when you are presenting in your work, when you're giving a presentation or a talk, or you're speaking on a panel, being able to be physically relaxed and physically open and physically loose is incredibly important to your voice and to your breath. It's so important. Not to grip, right? Not to
Yeah.
just to kind of lock yourself down. It doesn't work.
And I want to hark back because of something that you said. You're making me think about the exoskeleton. We need to be able to let that pressure out, to decalcify that exoskeleton. We need to be able to breathe, and we need to be able to support each other to do it the same, because this is how we are not just treating each other humanely, but it's how we're actually fostering creativity, and that we're bringing about the best conditions for ourselves and our others to thrive. And it takes courage to acknowledge when that's happening and to create change, to decalcify, and to make sure that we're supporting ourselves and others.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Agreed. It is a process. It is a group process. We are so much stronger together. We are so much stronger together. And the sooner we recognize that, the sooner we can make bigger strides. It's so important.
Oh, so important. Two of the things that have really struck with me in this conversation are the power of solidarity, making sure that we're looking outside of ourselves, regardless of who else we might potentially be in solidarity with. So, women needing to do it with women, yes, but also what is that broader allyship? What are ways that we can support each other? Um, and I have to say, I love that phrase, women together can change the weather.
It's what I've seen everywhere I go, really.
I'd love for you to share at least one of the big lessons that you've learned in your life as a woman in business, both within music and in corporate environments.
Ah, I mean, there's so many. There are so many. I, I think one of them really comes back to understanding how to draw from your deep inner resources. And it's funny, I think that there is a kind of, it's what I was talking about before with sort of the concept of attunement. A performer has access to something that is invisible but incredibly powerful. And I think that I learned that I can perform under just about any circumstances. I mean, I've had crazy, weird things happen when I was on stage. As an actor, I had like, a 400-pound stage light fall within a hair's breadth of my skull. I had costumes like weirdly fall off in the middle of, of plays and things. Like, I just had to like finish the monologue with like my hand gripping the back of my dress closed or something. I mean, I've had certainly all kinds of, audience incidents and very, very unpredictable things. Oh God. One time, yeah. Wow. One time I was performing in a very big rock club in New York City when I was still there. I was performing as a backup singer and I got electrocuted by the mic. I got shocked. So I actually couldn't come too close to the mic and I couldn't stop the whole, song and say, hey, wait, this is unsafe. We just had to kind of go forward. The show must go on, et cetera. So I just kind of instantly adjusted to being further back from the mic and just projecting more. And so the understanding of the unpredictability of the stage environment, the performance environment, and how that sort of extends to life, how life is very unpredictable, and just trusting my inner ability to attune to the moment and to be present and to just work through it. I think is probably the biggest lesson that any performer will learn, but I certainly learned that in the music business.
Wow. So you never literally know what's coming at you or what's coming off you.
Literally never. You can practice and perform. This is what I learned in musical theater for so many years. You can practice and perform everything to the letter. You can do it thousands of times, and yet when you step on stage in front of a live audience, literally all bets are off.
Wow. Wow. All right.
Also life.
Yes, I was going to say, and that's the perfect analogy for just, getting out of the bed in the morning, or even like just waking up in the morning.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. As we wrap, Alicia, any final thoughts you'd like to share with our audience today?
What I really want to say, I know your show is really about courage, and I really want to say something that I have observed in my own life and that I've seen with my clients is that we maybe have a kind of a cultural misunderstanding about courage. We believe, I think a lot of times, that courage is the thing that you need before you perform the action. But so much of what I've seen for myself and with my clients is that, in fact, courage is the thing that you get after the action. And you really start to develop almost like a kind of like a bank, like a well of deep courage that happens from performing whatever's in front of you, whatever the scary thing is, over and over again, and really seeing yourself doing it successfully. I think there's a famous saying, confidence is the successful repetition of any endeavor.
Yes.
And I think that courage is part of that as well. Courage is something that comes to us after, and courage is very powerful. I think courage is actually more important in many ways than sort of our cultural idea of confidence,
I love that. I love that you reframed it that way. I think they're all very linked. And one of our former guests on this show, Shazak Sonoda, said courage begets courage. And I do believe that that is part of the process, that you grow and allow for courage to flourish.
It's true. It's viral.
There we go. Courageous contagion. That's why we're here.
Oh, love it. Love it.
I so appreciate you, Alicia. Your courage is, I feel it. I feel it in every exchange that I have with you. The whole idea of courage versus confidence. It's a powerful mix. They are different things. And I do believe that they actually, they foster each other. They help each other. They almost fertilize each other. These are the things that you are doing every day in your work. I mean, obviously you've done that in the music industry, but with women within the corporate space, helping them to find that power voice and to truly advocate for themselves. Thank you for so much. Thank you for speaking to a story that I know is challenging for you and for trusting us and our audience with that. It's so important that we actually do shed light on these horrible things that happen so that we can prevent it from happening in the future. So I want to honor you for taking us there with you, and it means a lot.
Thank you. You too, Suzanne. Thank you for your work as well. And thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Today's conversation is a combination of inspiration, trauma, courage. Ultimately, yes, that is that thread. I am so incredibly grateful to all of you for listening and for Alicia for sharing her story. I hope that hearing this gives you the opportunity to take some inventory on where you might be advocating more robustly for yourself and others, and how you might be able to bring more courage into our world. Thank you for being here. Stay courageous. The Courage Effect is brought to you by Weller Collaboration. We're a team of talented coaches, executive advisors, and consultants who partner with our clients to enhance their leadership, become more adaptable, and to really get out of their own way to work more effectively together. More information about Weller Collaboration is available via the links in our show notes. Please spread the word about the Courage Effect. Rate and review your favorite episodes on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or your favorite podcast platform. Share with your colleagues, family, or anyone in your universe who might be inspired by a good dose of courage. If you have feedback, thoughts, or would like to apply to be a guest, please contact us via our website. Benny Mathers is our producer. Dave Nelson composed our theme music. Alex Sandyforth is our administrative maven. And I'm your host, Suzanne Weller.